Alright everyone, here it is. My Pokemon anime journey, part 9. Now before I start, let me just say once again that these videos took a long time for me to make. Also, originally I was going to make a original tournament, but since you all really want to see this story so badly, I decided to scrap that idea and just use the one that was in the anime. Alright, without further ado, let's begin part 9. So my character is making his way to Snow Point City, but he rested at Jubilee City and then he rested at Orberg City. While resting at Orberg City's Pokemon Center, Omega's egg started to hatch, and then came out none other than Riolu. While Riolu didn't trust Omega at first, so Omega tried to try and get Riolu's trust. After 3 days, as well as using the Sue Bells to calm Riolu down, in the end, Riolu trusted Omega. However, before Omega catches Riolu, Omega sends Luxray to Professor Oak's lab. Once Omega catches Riolu, he'd make his way to Snow Point City by passing through Mount Coronet. In Mount Coronet, Omega found a Dawnstone. Once exiting the Mount Coronet, Omega pushed through the snow and arrived at Snow Point City. Once Omega arrived at Snow Point City, it made sure his team was ready at the Snow Point City's Pokemon Center, then head straight to the Pokemon Gym to challenge against the Snow Point City gym leader, Candice. The battle started off with Candice's Sneasel, while Omega uses Riolu. While Riolu had the type advantage, Riolu hasn't been in a real battle, and only trained with Omega's Pokemon. While Riolu did took some damage, Sneasel was finished off by using Riolu's Vacuum Wave. Both gym leader and trainer called back their Pokemon. Candice called out a Meditite, while Omega called out his Honchkrow. Despite the good battle, a Meditite was knocked out by Honchkrow's Aerial Ace. Candice then called it back her Meditite and called out a third Pokemon, Snover, while Omega could still keep his Honchkrow. And thanks to Honchkrow's moves countered Snover's attacks, in the end, Honchkrow won the battle. Then Candice called out a final Pokemon, Abomasnow. Omega, seeing his Honchkrow getting tired, decided to call him back and called out Infernape. And of course you might know, took down Candice's Abomasnow with ease. In the end, Omega received the Icicle Badge. After resting at the Pokemon Center and healing his team, Omega decided to go to the next gym, which is in Sunyshore City. But while walking through the snow, the weather got too difficult for Omega to continue, so he stopped and rested inside a snow cave that he found. Once he entered, he met up with a wild Snowrunt. When to show no harm, Omega decided to give Snowrunt some food, and Snowrunt became much more friendly. After a day of rest, the snow calmed down, and Omega said goodbye to Snowrunt. But Snowrunt followed Omega, and then Omega asked Snowrunt if he would like to come with him. Snowrunt jumped and smiled, showing that he would like to come with him. Pulling out his Pokedex, he sent Honchkrow to Professor Oak's lab, and catched the wild Snowrunt. Omega then looked at Snowrunt's move by scanning it with its Pokedex, an idea that he got from Paul. After finding Snowrunt's moves and gender, Omega then remembered a trainer talking about a female Snowrunt can evolve into a Frostlass by using the Dawnstone. After calling out his Snowrunt, he gave Snowrunt the Dawnstone. Snowrunt then evolved into Frostlash. However, after traveling a little bit, Omega accidentally ended up in a place called Lilypad Town. So Omega tried to get a blimp to Sunyshore City. However, he met up with none other than Lucas. Both Omega and Lucas catched up, and even both trainers have 7 gym badges. Omega then asked Lucas if he's going for his 8th gym badge. Lucas said no, and he's actually going to the Twin Leaf Festival. Seeing how fun that sounds, Omega decided to go with Lucas. After taking a blimp ride from Lilypad Town to Hot Home City, and after traveling for a bit, Omega and Lucas arrived in Twin Leaf Town. After walking a bit, Omega and Lucas meet up with Johanna, Dawn's mother. Once Omega introduced himself, Johanna invites Omega to live in her house for a bit. Omega then stayed at Johanna's house, and after a few days, Dawn, Ash, and Brock arrived in Twin Leaf Town for the Twin Leaf Festival. The next day, it was the start of the Twin Leaf Festival, but on that day, someone tried to take place of Professor Oak, but he was known by the young trainer's Tyranitar. On the second day of the Twin Leaf Festival, Omega, Ash, Brock, Dawn, even Johanna met with Barry, who was also here for the Twin Leaf Festival. So while Ash, Dawn, and Barry were doing some training, or even helping with Brock, who's volunteering a one-man booth, decided to have some fun. On the near end of the day, Omega and Brock meet with Barry's dad, Palmer. When Ash heard that Palmer was the top trainer in Twin Leaf Town, he challenged him for a battle, but Dawn and Barry were both eager as well. Barry then tells them about the upcoming Twin League Town tournament, where the winner can battle against Palmer. After hearing about that, all of them decide to enter the upcoming Twin League Town tournament. And on the final day of the Twin League Town is the tournament, and besides the 5 trainers, Lucas is also entering the tournament. Now in my version, Lucas battled against Ash in the 3rd round of the tournament, with Lucas using Leafeon and Ash using Grotto. During the battle, Grotto did do the green aura radiating up in the area of his bushes on the back. Dawn takes note of this, thinking it would be good for a Pokemon contest. However, in the end, Ash lost the battle against Lucas, and in the tournament, the only one who's going to be battling is none other than Omega. Now, Palmer didn't expect to battle against Omega, but even so, he said he wouldn't go easy on him. Palmer then sent out his Rhyperior. Palmer even informs Omega that his Rhyperior serves some difficult opponents for the Battle Tower challenges. Omega was going to call out his Floatzel, however, he decides to surprise everyone by calling out his Riolu. And everyone was surprised that Omega had Riolu. But Palmer was surprised because it's rare to see a Riolu, but he still believes that he could still win. Omega starts the battle, telling his Riolu to use Vacuum Wave. But Rhyperior still stands firm, only taking minimal damage thanks to Solid Rock. Though Palmer compliments Omega's Riolu's strength, he orders Rhyperior to use Rock Polish. Riolu fires Vacuum Wave once again, but Rhyperior dodges it quickly, shocking everyone at fast how it moves thanks to Rock Polish. Rhyperior gets up close and launches Sandstorm, sending Riolu into the air. Riolu then recovers and dives down for an attack, but Rhyperior attacks using Rock Wrecker. However, Riolu dodges it using Detect and lands in front of Rhyperior. Riolu then uses Force Palm, pushing Rhyperior back, and luck was on Omega's side because Rhyperior was now paralyzed. However, it didn't stop Rhyperior, he recovered and charged with Mega Horn. Riolu then used Detect again, tripping up Rhyperior. Riolu then struck using Draining Punch from behind Rhyperior. Rhyperior stands up from the attack and then uses Sandstorm, but Riolu hung in and stands from the attack. But then it happened. Riolu started to glow and evolved into Lucario. Everyone was amazed, even Palmer, but he still believes he's gonna win. Then he tells Rhyperior to use Rock Wrecker, but Lucario countered it with Aura Spear. Lucario then finished off Rhyperior using Drain Punch. With that Drain Punch, Rhyperior was unable to battle, making Omega the winner. Everyone was surprised, but started clapping and cheering for the both of them. They both compliment each other and their Pokemon. Then Palmer presents the golden trophy to Omega for winning the tournament. After that was over, Barry told Omega that he was lucky that his Riolu evolved into Lucario, and told him that he would lose next time he meet his dad. Omega agreed and enjoyed the final days of Twilight Festival. The next day, Ash and his friends, Lucas, Paul, and even Omega made their own way to Sunyshore City. Instead of going upper to the Sinnoh region, Omega decided to go down, headed to a town called Sagetown. Once he got there, a Pokemon teacher from Sagetown asked Omega if he was a Pokemon trainer. Omega said yes, and he asked why. The teacher told Omega that they were supposed to have a special guest at their Pokemon school. However, the special guest is going to be running late, and she would like Omega to entertain the children until the special guest arrived. Omega, having nothing much to do, agreed and helped her. Once he arrived at her school, Omega then told her students about his journeys through Sinnoh, Kanto, Johto, and even the Orange Islands. Omega even showed the students of her school the Pokemon that he has right now. During school lunchtime, enjoyed themselves outside having lunch, but then a car pulled over. Driving it was the champion of Sinnoh, Cynthia. Omega asked why the champion's here, and the teacher said that she is a special guest. Cynthia apologized for running late, but the teacher was alright about this. Once the teacher introduced Omega, and Omega tells him that he's from Palatown, Cynthia then asked if he knows a trainer named Ash, and Omega did. Cynthia then asked Omega if he would like to have a battle with her. Omega asked why, and Cynthia was going to show off her Pokemon, but since he was very grateful of helping her, as well as running late, would like to have a battle with him. Omega was nervous at first, but he plucked up the courage and agreed to battle against Cynthia. Cynthia started off the battle by calling out her Garchomp, while Omega used Lucario. But even with Lucario having the type advantage, was able to be pushed back by Cynthia's Garchomp. While battling, Lucario then learned a new move, known as Dragon Pulse. However, even with Dragon Pulse, Lucario was defeated by Cynthia's Garchomp. Even though Omega lost against Cynthia, he thanked her for the battle. At the end of the day, Cynthia went her own way, leaving Sage Town, saying goodbye to the teacher and the students at the Pokemon School. After traveling for a long while, Omega arrived back in Pastoria City. Once he healed Lucario at the Pastoria City's Pokemon Center, Omega then continued his journey to Sunny Shore City. But once he got there, Sunny Shore City's power just turned off. Suddenly he saw the tower started shaking and he decided to go over there. Once he arrived there, he met up with Ash, Brock, Dawn, Sunny Shore's officer Jenny, as well as 2 other people he hasn't met yet. As for who's causing all this, is none other than Team Rocket. They start moving the tower, then they blasted into the sky. Luckily, Ash, as well as the 2 other people managed to grab on, unfortunately the one with the red hair, splashing in the ocean. Omega then found out that his name was Flint, one of the Elite Fours in Sinnoh. As soon as they arrived at Sunny Shore's Pokemon Center, they found out that the center needed electricity to help the injured Pokemon. So while Flint and Brock are using pedal power for electricity for Omega and Dawn, they helped out as much as they can with Nurse Joy. Soon the Sunny Shore Tower came back with Ash and the gym leader Volkner, as well as Ash's new fully evolved Torterra. Unfortunately, Volkner needs time to fix the Sunny Shore gym. Both trainers understand, so Ash, Brock and Dawn leave Sunny Shore City while Omega stays and do some training. After 11 days of hard training, Volkner's gym was finally reopened. However, Volkner promised Ash for a battle. Omega understands and just wait until Ash's battle is finished. However, as soon as it got word out that Volkner's back battling, more and more trainers in line ready to battle against him. But on that day, after Ash's battle against Volkner, on the next day, it's Omega's turn. Volkner started off the battle with none other than Electivire, while Omega used Rampardos. While Electivire knows Fire Punch and Ice Punch, he also knows Cross Chop. Even so, Electivire was defeated by Rampardos. Volkner then called out a second Pokemon, Magnezone. Omega then called back his Rhyperior and called out Infernape. However, during the battle, Magnezone used Supersonic, making Infernape confused and started hitting himself. Omega then called back his Infernape and called out his Lucario. After using Aura Spear and Drain Punch, was able to take down Magnezone. Volkner then called out his third Pokemon, Luxray. Omega then called back his Lucario and called back out his Rampardos. However, during the battle, Luxray defeated Rampardos with an Iron Tail. Omega then called back his Rampardos and called out his Lucario. Lucario managed to go toe-to-toe with Luxray, but in the end was defeated by Luxray's Shockwave. Omega can only use one Pokemon left, and that is his Infernape. During the battle, Infernape managed to deal some damage to Luxray, but to finish it all off, Luxray charged him with Thunderfang. Omega tells Infernape to use Flame Wheel, but instead of Flame Wheel, Infernape finishes off the battle with its new move, Flare Blitz. In the end, Omega was the victor and received the Beacon Badge. With all 8 badges, Omega can enter the Sinnoh League. Omega then heard that he only had less than a month, and the place is going to be held at Lily of the Valley Islands. So Omega took a ferry to arrive at Lily of the Valley Islands. Once arrived there, Omega immediately heads to the Pokemon Center to register for the league. Nurse Joy scans Omega's Pokedex and received his trainer data onto the computer, registering him for the Sinnoh League. Omega then made his way to the Trainer Academy. When he arrived there to his room, he noticed a basket with a note from Professor Oak. While headed to call Professor Oak via video phone, he meets up with Ash and his friends and found out Ash is going to call Professor Oak as well. Once they call Professor Oak, both requested some of their other Pokemon to train with. Dawn was clearly excited to see more of Ash and Omega's Pokemon. While Ash prepared to transfer, exchanging his current team, except his Pikachu for the others, Omega exchanged his entire team. However, Team Rocket as usual planned to steal Ash and Omega's Pokemon, and grabs 11 of them during the transfer. The evils are soon blasted off again, but Ash and Omega's Pokeballs since set flying as well. They soon find all of the Pokeballs, but they seem to be all empty. So they all set out to find Ash and Omega's missing Pokemon. They soon find Ash's Quillfish and Totodile, as well as Omega's Quagsire and Victreebel, while Ash finds his Snorlax eating in the kitchen. While Omega with Dawn and Brock, they found Omega's Gyarados and Lapras. While they're back to Ash, they soon found not only Omega's Jolteon, but also his Typhlosion. Then after meeting up with Barry and hearing his story, hearing that he got tackled by an unknown Pokemon, Ash called out that it must be one of his. as soon as they went to the location where Barry got hit and then got hit behind, and it was none other than his Bayleaf. And she showed clear affection to Ash, and after counting Ash's Pokemon, there's only one left. Meanwhile, Team Rocket isn't through yet, though after going after Ash's last missing Pokemon, Cyndaquil, with a seemingly invincible robot. During the battle, Cyndaquil evolves into Quilava, and uses newly learned Eruption move to send Team Rocket blasting off for a second time. Later on, Ash and Omega talk to Professor Oak as they proceed to train with more of their Pokemon. Ash with Glalie, Torkoal, Noctowl, Muck, and Donphan, and Omega trained with his Tyranitar, Gardevoir, Skarmory, Persian, Nidoking, and Sceptile. That night of the opening ceremony begins. Omega then notices Wally, Lucas, Nando, Conway, Barry, Paul, as well as Ash, all competing. And so, he looked forward to facing off in the first round tomorrow is none other than against Nando. As for Ash, he'll be battling against Wally, but luckily for everyone, Ash's friends can watch Omega's battle, and then next will be Ash against Wally. That night, Omega sends back Sceptile for Typhlosion, Nidoking for Infernape, and Persian for Honchkrow. On the next day, Omega and Nando's 3-on-3 Pokemon battle was about to begin. Nando wasted no time and called out his Roselia, while Omega called out his Typhlosion. Early in the battle, Roselia was overpowering Typhlosion, however, Typhlosion was able to defeat Roserade. Nando then called out his second Pokemon, Armaldo. However, Omega still keeps his Typhlosion. However, Armaldo counters Typhlosion attack with Protect, then finishing off with Rock Blast. Omega then called out his second Pokemon, Infernape. Thanks for Infernape being both a fire and fighting type, was able to counter Armaldo being a rock and bug type. In the end, Infernape was able to defeat Armaldo, finishing off the battle with Flare Blitz. Nando then called out his final Pokemon, Kricketune, while Omega called out his Honchkrow. At first, Kricketune used Silver Wing, while Honchkrow used Dark Pulse, clashing each other, but soon, Kricketune used Sing against Honchkrow. However, Honchkrow wasn't fast asleep, surprising everyone, including Nando. Omega then told about Honchkrow's ability, known as Insomnia. To put it simply, Honchkrow can be able to sleep. With that ability, as well as finishing off with Aerial Ace, was able to defeat Nando's Kricketune, putting Omega into the second round. Just outside, Omega thanks Nando for the battle, and then Nando left on his own journey. Omega went back to the stadium to watch Ash catch him against Wally. Wally called out his Magnezone, while Ash called out his Pikachu. During the battle, Pikachu mostly used Iron Tail and Quick Attack, while Magnezone used mostly Flash Cannon and Reflect. Seeing he can't win this using his Pikachu, Ash called back Pikachu, and he called out his Donphan. After using Earthquake and Rollout, Magnezone was unable to battle. Then, Barry then ran and told Omega and Brock about the trainer who using a Darkrai. Brock was surprised, but Omega was more shocked, while Dawn is still cheering for Ash. Wally then called out his second Pokemon, Altaria. Ash still keeps his Donphan, but in the end, Altaria was able to take down using Dragon Pulse. Ash then called back his Donphan and called out his Pikachu, and of course, Pikachu was able to take down Altaria. But then, Wally called out his final Pokemon, Gallane, while Ash still used his Pikachu, but unfortunately lost to his Gallane. Ash then called out his final Pokemon, Staraptor, and with a powerful Brave Bird was able to take down Gallane, putting Omega into the second round. Once the battle was over, Barry, Omega, and Brock told about a trainer who has a Darkrai. At half end of the day, the results were in for the second round for tomorrow. Conway, Ash, Paul, Barry, Lucas, Omega, as well as the mystery trainer were all battling against some random Pokemon trainers. And of course, all 7 of them got to the third round. On the third day, the results were in for the third round. Ash against Conway, Barry against Paul, and for Omega, he's going up against Lucas. On the next day, Omega, along with Ash, Dawn, and Brock, watches Paul and Barry's Pokemon battle. And just like in the anime, Barry lost against Paul. That afternoon, Omega decided to switch out his team, ready for the battle against Lucas. So he switched out Gardevoir for Flygon, Honchkrow for Jolteon, and Infernape for Lucario. On the next day, it's Omega against Lucas. Lucas started out the battle by calling out his Staraptor, while Omega called out Skarmory. Skarmory did use spikes, but Staraptor was able to do some damage to Skarmory. Omega then called back his Skarmory and called out his Jolteon. With Jolteon's quick speed, as well as having a type advantage, was able to beat Staraptor. Lucas then called out his second Pokemon, Torterra, but Torterra took some damage due to spikes. Omega then called back his Jolteon and bring back out Skarmory. With Skarmory's speed, deal some damage to Torterra using Steel Wing, and finish off with Sky Attack. Lucas then called out its third Pokemon, Garchomp. However, it still took damage due to spikes. Omega still uses Skarmory. However, Skarmory was defeated by Garchomp's Fire Fang. Omega then called out his third Pokemon, Tyranitar. The two Pseudo legendary Pokemon battled it out. Surprisingly, in the end, both Pokemon were unable to battle, putting Omega into the top 8. Even though Lucas lost his place in the Sinnoh League, he said that he's going to start cheering on for Omega. During the battle against Ash against Conway, Conway was defeated. And of course, in the quarterfinals, Ash is going up against Paul, while Omega is going to battle some random Pokemon trainer. But on the next day, just like in the original anime, Ash won against Paul. But as for Omega, he won his battle and made it way to the next round. But Ash's next battle is going to be against a trainer with the Darkrai. And just like before, Omega was going to be battling another random Pokemon trainer. But just like in the anime, Ash defeated Darkrai by using Sceptile. But then, the Darkrai trainer named Tobias called out his second Pokemon, Latios, surprising everyone. However, Tobias won the semi-finals, but Tobias still thanks Ash for a great battle. As for Omega, he managed to win against the semi-finals, but now he must battle against Tobias. Omega nervous about this, but he decided to make the ultimate team. Omega picked the first Pokemon in his team is none other than Honchkrow. With its ability Insomnia, it's perfect against Darkrai and its Dark Void attacks. Omega decides to add Gyarados into the team. Knowing some powerful moves will be perfect against any fire Pokemon. But just in case, Omega add Lucario into his team to not only try and face Darkrai, but maybe also Latios. Speaking of Latios, since that Pokemon is a Psychic and Dragon type, Omega decides to add Frostlash to the team. Being an Ice and Ghost type is a perfect match against Latios. As for Omega's fifth Pokemon, even though it's not stronger than Tyranitar or Garchomp, he chooses his Flygon. As for his final Pokemon, Omega made a quick call to Charizard Valley, asking Lizara for his Charizard by going over to Professor Oak's lab so it can be quickly transferred to the Sinnoh region. Morning came and Omega received his Charizard. Happy to see him again, Omega told his Charizard about Darkrai and Latios. Expecting to fight a legendary Pokemon, Omega needed him more than ever. Charizard just did a thumbs up and agreeing to help. Omega then looked at Charizard's new moves thanks to the Pokedex. Besides Flamethrower, had learned 3 new moves. Soon, Omega arrived at the battlefield. In front of him is Tobias. Both trainers called out their Pokemon. Tobias started off with none other than Darkrai, while Omega called out his Honchkrow. During the battle, Tobias told his Darkrai to use Dark Void, but of course, that didn't work on Honchkrow. Catching Darkrai and Tobias by surprise, Omega then told his Honchkrow to end this with Aerial Ace. With that Aerial Ace, Darkrai was unable to battle. Tobias complimented Omega and his strategy, and then called out his second Pokemon, Latios. Omega wasted no time and returned back to Honchkrow and called out Frostlash. Latios' normal type Giga Impact, as well as its psychic move Luster Purge, can't do any damage to Frostlash. But the only attack that Latios can use was Dragon Pulse. In the end, Latios was defeated by Frostlash. The crowd cheered as Omega defeated Latios. Tobias admitted that Omega is one of the strongest trainers that he met, but his third Pokemon will defeat him. Tobias then called out his third Pokemon, Regigigas. Omega, after looking at the Pokedex, found out that Regigigas is a normal type, so he kept his Frostlash in the battle. However, Regigigas surprised Omega and Frostlash by using Thunder Punch and Fire Punch. With those two moves, Frostlash was defeated. After seeing those moves, Omega decides to call out his Honchkrow again. During the battle, Regigigas managed to grab Honchkrow and defeated it using Crush Grab. Omega had no choice but to call out his Lucario. Lucario managed to dodge Regigigas' attacks and Hyper Beam, and attacked using his fighting moves Aura Spear and Drain Punch. In the end, Omega's Regigigas was defeated by Lucario. Tobias was amazed of Omega's Lucario's strength, calling out his most trusted Pokemon, that being his Lucario. Everyone was surprised that Tobias is not using a legendary Pokemon. Omega was gonna call back his Lucario, but his Lucario wants to battle against Tobias' Lucario, and Omega smiles and accepts Lucario's wishes. The two Lucarios battled it out. Tobias' Lucario, knowing bulk up, managed to overpower Omega's Lucario, but thanks to Omega's Lucario using Drain Punch against the Regigigas, regaining its stamina, dodges Tobias' Lucario's attacks. But surprisingly, both Lucarios were unable to battle. Tobias complimented Omega's Lucario's strength, as well as countering Darkrai's Dark Void, as well as most of Latios' attacks. But Tobias, with a serious face, saying that no matter what Pokemon Omega's gonna be using, he would still win. He called out his fifth Pokemon, Heatran. Omega smiles and just called out his Gyarados. However, as soon as Gyarados attacked using Aqua Tail, Heatran used Protect. Then, Heatran finished Gyarados off with one move, called Magna Storm. Omega had no choice, wanted to save his Charizard for last, but to call out his Flygon. But even with Flygon being a ground type, took a lot of damage from Magna Storm. However, Flygon had enough strength to continue on with the battle. Flygon attacked Heatran using Earthquake, then finished off the battle with Dragon Rush. With those two moves, Heatran was defeated. Then, Flygon passed out. The referee then meant that Flygon was unable to battle as well. Everyone in the crowd started clapping and cheering, saying that this is the most insane Pokemon battle in the history of the Sinnoh region. Tobias then all of a sudden started laughing, saying that this is the most fun Pokemon battle he had ever been. Tobias then told Omega that this last Pokemon was the most difficult one that he captured, and now he is going to face it. Tobias called out his final Pokemon, Entei. Everyone was surprised, and Omega smiles and says, even though that you've been throwing out legendary Pokemon left and right, there is one Pokemon you have never faced. The Pokemon that helped me win the Kanto region. Omega then called out his Charizard. During the battle, Omega's Charizard and Tobias' Entei fight each other so much with their moves, they nearly destroyed the battlefield. Charizard can catch up with Entei thanks to one of his new moves being Dragon Dance. Charizard was able to deal damage to Entei and without using Flamethrower, thanks to the other two moves. The first being Thunder Punch and the second being Dragon Claw. Omega's Charizard and Entei clashed and battled until Entei fired a close-up overheat. In the end, Charizard was defeated, making Tobias the winner of the Sinnoh region. But everyone started clapping and cheering for the two Pokemon trainers and their amazing battle. Omega held his Charizard, telling how proud he was, and even Tobias was happy from the battle. At the end of the day, the Sinnoh League finally ended. The next day, Omega went with Ash, Dawn, and Brock back to Twin Lake Town. Now everything still follows. Brock attempts to heal Normagee's sick and injured Pokemon by some very unhappy tentacles by the cause of Team Rocket. Brock's Happiny, after helping him care of some patients, has evolved into Chansey. Then, the sick and injured Pokemon got all better. Nurse Joyce then suggests to Brock that he should be a great Pokemon doctor, and he started to think of the career plan he never even considered before. After one day of sleeping at Dawn's house in Twin Lake Town, they bid fond farewell to Dawn, Ash, Omega, and Brock boarded the boat to Kanto. The three of them said their own warm goodbyes as Brock heads to Pewter City, and Ash and Omega set off towards their beloved home of Pallet Town. Okay, so let me just say, yes, I gave my version of Tobias more Pokemon in this story. But this is my story and universe, and I tried to figure out to combine Ash's main story and creating my own. But while I was making this video, I found out more about Tobias than I should have known. But now you must be asking me, why did I give him Entei? Why did I give him Lucario? Why did I give him Regigigas? And why did I give him Heatran? Well, not Heatran though, you can actually see that for yourself. Alright, let me just start with the most easiest one. In the Japanese version of the Sinnoh League picture, you can see Ash calling out his Infernape and battling against Entei. Then Weasel battling against Darkrai, and then Pikachu battling against Lucario. Then I just said to myself, wait a minute, Lucario. Then I remember the original first opening of Diamond and Pearl, even the English dub. You can see Palkia, and then Lucario, and then Dialga. So I just said to myself, this is gonna be maybe one of Tobias's Pokemon. Because how did he even get a Darkrai? Simple, he used a Lucario to capture a Darkrai. Now of course you must be talking to me right now, okay, but how did he get a Regigigas? Simple, when he captured the Darkrai, he used that Darkrai to get Regigigas. On the 12th opening, if you watch it in Japanese, you will see Regigigas fighting a Darkrai. Now, as soon as I found out about this, I was mind blown. I gotta add this into the video. Even though this is all fan made and just for fun, I just wanted to give Tobias more Pokemon than just Latios and Darkrai. I wanted to try and find some more information about Regigigas, but then I remember about another Pokemon that would appeared, most notably Shaman, because in the episode Keeping in Top Form, Ash, Dawn and Brock knows of Shaman. So the Regigigas that Darkrai thought could be the Regigigas from Giratina and the Sky Warrior. So before they met Brandon and his Regigigas, they seen the Regigigas from the Giratina movie. So I decided, you know what, even if nobody believes me, even if the episodes are out, this is the closest thing that I'm going to put into my story. Alright, I think I made the point about Tobias and his Pokemon, so let's just continue. Let's see, anything else? Oh yeah, Omega winning the Twinley Town Festival. Now, of course, in the original timeline, Ash wins and receives the Golden Trophy. But in Pokemon Journeys, as soon as he defeated Leon, we don't see the Golden Trophy again. Besides, I think Ash just battling against Palmer was to show off Grotto's power-up form. Besides, if Ash wanted to still do that, he could have still do it with his Torterra, so I don't see any reason why my character should get the Golden Trophy. But after battling against Palmer, Cynthia, even Tobias, my trainer still lost and doesn't win the Sinnoh League. But that's fine, you know what's gonna happen next. My character is going on the next journey, which of course is Univers. And I can't wait to do that because there is going to be so many Pokemon that is going to be rare from other regions. So in the next story, I'm going to just give my character Pokemon only from the Univers region. No Kalos, no Kanto, no Sinnoh, and no Johto. As for what Unova Pokemon I'm going to give my character, that is for me to know and you to find out soon. And one more question you must be asking me before I talk about the Pokemon's moves. Am I going to add Tobias in future stories? If you all really like my version of Tobias, who knows, I might add him again. But if you all don't, then I can understand and just use the main Pokemon characters, and that's it. Alright, let's talk about moves. Let's start off with Omega's Riolu. Now the first move Riolu knows was Vacuum Wave, but whilst bonding with Riolu, Riolu showed off other moves. The first one being Detect, and the second one being Force Palm. Once Omega captured Riolu and did some training, Riolu learned Drain Punch. But once Riolu evolved into Lucario, it forgot Vacuum Wave for Aura Sphere and Detect for Metal Claw. And during the battle against Cynthia, it forgot Force Palm to learn Dragon Pulse. Then it's the second Pokemon Omega catch, Snorunt. Now, Snorunt knows Icy Wind, Headbutt, and Protect, but once it evolved into Frostlash, all of her moves change. She learned Hail, Ice Shard, Ice Beam, and Shadow Ball. Next up is Omega's Infernape, who forgot Flame Wheel to learn Flare Blitz. And during the 11 days training in Sunnyshield City, Infernape forgot Sword Dance to learn Thunder Punch. But not only Infernape, but also Float Sword during the 11 days of training. Float Sword forgot Ice Fang to learn Rain Dance. As for Roserade and Rapados, they haven't learned any new moves. Now for the Pokemon that Omega used during the Sinnoh League, because even though they were at Professor Oak's lab, they still learned some new moves, just like Ash's Pokemon. Quagsire, who forgot Water Gun for Hydro Pump, Gyarados forgot Hyper Beam for Aqua Tail. As for Flygon, forgot Rock Slide to learn Draco Meteor. And last but not least is Charizard. While it still knows Flamethrower, he forgot Fire Blast, Blast Burn, and Sword Dance to know Thunder Punch, Dragon Dance, and Dragon Claw. Now, as for Scizor and Rampados, I was gonna add them into the video, but since my character had to battle against Nando, I just thought it would be a good change. But my character did use Scizor and Rampados during the Sinnoh League off screen. As an apology, I'll be announcing their new moves. Let's start off with Scizor. It learned X-Scissor, Double Hit, Iron Head, and Swagger. As for Rhyperior, knows Rock Polish, Hammer-On, Stone Edge, and Mega Horn. As for the rest of Omega Pokemon, they still know the same moves. And with that, that's the end of the video. If you have any questions about this story, don't be hesitate to comment them down below. This is Omega Emperor, stay awesome.